Hey folks, today I'm going to show you what I think are the top 15 most important Docker commands. These of course are not all of the Docker commands, but they're the ones that I think are the most helpful and the most important for most users. If you can learn these commands and what they do, you'll be well on your way to becoming a Docker expert. I'm going to break this lesson down into 4 different sections. The first section is using images, which will show how to pull and run images from a registry. The second section will be about troubleshooting, where I'll show some commands to help troubleshoot and investigate issues on running containers. The third section is about managing images, which is all about building, tagging, and pushing images to a repository. And the fourth and final section will be about Docker Desktop, where I will compare the commands that we run to what Docker Desktop provides you. So let's jump in and get started. The first step is making sure that you have the Docker Desktop app installed. If you don't already have it, I'll put a link to the page down below, but go here, download what you need, and install Docker Desktop. Now that you have Docker installed, how do you actually start using it, and what would you use it for? You can either run an existing image that someone else has already created, or you can build and run your own image. We're going to start out by using a pre-built image that someone else has already made for us. So let's walk through this lesson, and we're going to use Postgres for all of our demos. So the first command that we're going to use is docker pull. The docker pull command pulls an image and puts it on your local computer. Think of it as essentially downloading an image onto your computer. This docker pull command is going to pull the Postgres image from the Docker Hub. And I'll put a link to this down below, but here is the Docker Hub page for Postgres, and here you can see that command. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. I'm going to go into our terminal, I'll paste that and run that. We can confirm that we have this image on our computer by running our next command, docker images. And Docker images will list all of the images that you currently have on your computer. So when I run Docker images, I have 2 images on here, Postgres, which is the one I just downloaded, which is the latest tag right here. And you can see I also had a Postgres image that is from 5 months ago. Now that we have that image pulled down on our computer, we need to actually run it so that we can use it. And that brings us to our next command, docker run. The docker run command also only needs 1 argument, which is the name of the image. So for this image, it would be docker run Postgres. However, some images do also require more information to be passed into the image when it's run. So depending on what image you're using, you may be able to get away by just running docker run and then the image name. So if I just go ahead and run this, you'll see that it can't run because I didn't pass in the Postgres password. And it actually tells you right here how to pass in that information. I'm going to go ahead and add in that environment variable. So -e means it's an environment variable. The name of it is Postgres_password, and the value is my secret password. So I'll go ahead and run that, and then it outputs all of the information from the container as it starts up. So you can see here at the very bottom, it says the database system is ready to accept connections. So this means that this image is now running as a container, and now this Postgres database is ready for us to use. However, one bad thing is you can see that it's pretty much taken over my terminal. I can't, I can type stuff in here, but it doesn't do anything. So I'm going to stop this container. If you hit Control-C, that will basically shut down that container. And now what we can do is we can rerun this. However, we're going to pass in one more command, which is -d, and that stands for detached mode. So that means run the container, but once you're done, give me back the terminal so I can use it. So when I run that, you can see it prints out this long identifier. And this is the identifier of the container. So it's a unique identifier of that specific container that's running. And that's the only information it gave us, is that ID. So how can we make sure that this container is actually running? That's our next command, which is docker ps. Docker ps will list all of the running containers that are on your computer. So I ran that and it printed out 1 container. Here's the container ID, which matches this right here. It's a Postgres image. It was just created. It's on port 5432. And then this name here is just a random name that Docker makes up for you. Now, if you want, you can run that same command again with -a on it, and that will actually print out all of the containers you have on your computer, whether they're running or not. And so if I run that, you can see right here, this is the one that's running. Here are the 2 that I ran a little bit earlier. And then this one is another image that I have for another database that I use. Now our container is up and running, but how do we stop it? Well, that's our next command, docker stop. The docker stop command only needs 1 argument, which is either the name or the ID of the container. So I'll say docker stop, and you don't have to give it the whole entire ID. You can just give it the first couple of letters. So this is our running container right here, which starts with ABE. So if I say docker stop abe, that will stop that container. So now if I run docker ps again, there are no more running containers. And now that we've stopped that container, we also need to know how to restart it, which is the next command, docker start. And just like Docker stop, this only takes one argument, which is the name or the ID of the container. So if I say Docker start Abe, and then I run Docker PS, now you can see that we have that container back up and running. Let's imagine now that you've gotten into your Postgres database, you've made all your changes, everything looks good, and you no longer need the container on your computer, so you can remove it as well as the image. So how can you do that? I'm going to go ahead and stop it again. So I'm going to stop Abe. So to remove that container is Docker RM. Docker RM is for remove. So if I say Docker RM and then I give it Abe, and then if I say Docker PS-A, that's going to list out all of the containers. And you can see Abe is no longer on here. And I'm actually going to go ahead and really quickly clean up those other two that was created. And one really cool thing about this Docker remove command is you can actually give it multiple container IDs. So I'm going to say Docker RM, and I want to get rid of 18D and EBE. Now if I run Docker PS-A, I only have one container on my computer, which is great. But let's say I also want to clean up those images. So if I do Docker images, I have two Postgres images, one that I downloaded today, one from 5 months ago. I want to go ahead and clean up this image from today, and the command for that is Docker RMI. And that is for Docker remove image. So if I say Docker RMI, and then I pass it this image ID right here, or at least the beginning of it, 457. You can see it deleted quite a few things here. Don't panic when you see this. What it did is it actually deleted multiple layers of that image. So that's a whole other conversation about layers, but just know that it deleted that image. So if I type Docker images again, now I only have the one image. These commands we've covered so far are probably the most basic commands that you need in order to pull an image and run the image, and then see which images and containers you have on your computer. And in this example with this Postgres database, we pulled it, we ran it, and then we shut it down and we removed it. And with the way that containers work, all of the data in that container is contained inside that container. And so if you were doing work on that container that you wanted to keep, it's all gone now. And so sometimes that's great, you make changes, you just blow it away and everything goes away. But in the case of databases, you may not want that to happen. You may want to persist that data. And Docker has a way of persisting data, which is called volumes. And volumes are Docker's way of persisting data between your host, which in this case is our computer, and the container. So let's rerun this Docker run command with this Postgres database, and let's add a volume to it so that we don't lose all of our data. And the command for that is Docker volume. The command I'll run for this is Docker volume create, and then we're going to give it a name, and I'll call it Postgres demo. So we run that, and all it does is spit out the name of that volume. And just like with containers and images, there's also a way to list volumes. And that is Docker volume ls, which will list all the volumes that you currently have on your computer. And you can see I have a few here, but this Postgres demo is the one we just created. And now with that volume created, I can rerun the Docker run command for my Postgres image, and I'm going to use that volume. So I have the command here. I've added a couple things into it, but I have Docker run. I'm going to give it a name of Postgres demo, and this way it doesn't just create some random name like it was doing before. And then -v is volume. So I'm giving it the name of Postgres demo, which matches this volume name that we gave it here. And then I'm going to map it to this location. So in the case of Postgres, this is the location inside of the container where it stores all of the data. And essentially what this does is it means anything that's written to here is going to get written to this volume, which is on the host machine, and that way we won't lose it. So I'm still passing in the same environment variable. I'm also adding some port mapping here, and then I'm running that image. And one interesting thing that I didn't mention earlier is when you use the Docker run command, if you give it an image name and you don't have that image on your computer already, it'll actually go ahead and download it. In our previous steps, we actually removed the image for the Postgres with the latest tag on it. And you can see that it said, unable to find image Postgres latest locally. So I went ahead and it pulled that for me, which is one pretty cool thing about the Docker run command. And similar to that, I want to also mention that if I didn't explicitly create this Docker volume up here, it would have created it for me right here in this command if I didn't already have that. And so how this would work is when you give it a volume name, it will either use that volume name if it exists, or it will create it if it doesn't. And from now on, as long as I use that Postgres volume when I run this Postgres database, I won't lose any of the data that's inside of it. Let's move on now to the second section, which is troubleshooting. And I'm going to show you a couple different commands that are super helpful when trying to troubleshoot running containers. In our example now, we have our Postgres database up and running with our last Docker run command, but how do we actually know what's inside that container? It is possible to view the files that are inside of a Docker container, And to do that, you use the docker exec command. This command has to be run against a container that is already running, and it will execute the commands that you give it. So for example, let's say we want to see what files are in a specific folder inside of this Postgres container. So to do that, you say docker exec, and then you give it the name, which is Postgres demo, which that matches this name that I used right here. And then anything after this will be interpreted as a command and passed into the container. So let's say we want to see what's inside this var lib Postgres SQL data folder. So I'll copy that and I'll say ls and I'll pass that and I'll run that. So now this has listed out all of the files and folders that are inside that folder inside the container. And this is super helpful if you know exactly what folder you want to look at. But let's just say we want to get in the container and just poke around the file system and see what's there. So to do that, you would run docker exec, you pass -it, and this essentially is going to open up like an interactive terminal. And then just like before, you give it the name, and then the command for this will just be bash. Now we're basically in a bash terminal inside the Docker container. So if I say ls, that's the current folder that it's in. And now from here, you can navigate around the file system as if it was your own computer. So let's say cd var, cd lib, cd postgres, cd data, and here's all the same file and folders that were in this command right here. This docker exec command can be used to run any command inside the container. So for example, you could run a touch command to create a new file. Basically, as long as that command will work inside of the Linux environment that that container is running, that command should work. Let's move on to the next command, and this command is actually one of my favorites. And that command is docker logs. The docker logs command will print out all of the logs that have been printed by the container since it was started. So let's run docker logs, and this one just takes the image name just like the others. Here I ran that logs command, and you can see that this has printed out all the information that that container has spit out. And this is a great way to troubleshoot what's going on inside of a container, because most of the times if you are having issues or something isn't working, there's a good chance it's going to print out here that something is going on. So I'm going to show you how this is helpful, especially with this database example. You try to log in and it's not working and you're not quite sure why, and you can go here and see what's going on. So I'm in Azure Data Studio, and I'm going to connect to this database, and I'm going to purposely give it a bad password. So I'll try to connect. It tells us that the password authentication failed. Pretend this is some obscure error. We don't know what it is. If we go back into our terminal and we run docker logs again, you can see that it tells you exactly what's going on. It says password authentication failed for the user Postgres. So this is a great way to see behind the scenes what's going on. And I'll show you one more thing I like to do with this logs is if you say -f on that command, that's short for follow, and this will leave it open and it will just keep printing out any of the logs that come through on this container. So on my other screen over here, try to log in again, and you can see it printed out a new line that it was unsuccessful. So that's a great way of seeing real-time logs on a running container. All right, so let's move on to the next section, which is managing images and containers. So far in this demo, we've been using an image that was created by somebody else. But chances are, if you're using Docker, at some point you're going to want to create your own image. And then let's say you want to share that image with somebody else so they can use it too. So let's talk about the different commands to do those different things. And so the first of those commands is docker build. The docker build command will build a Docker file. And the Docker file has all of the steps that it needs to create that image. So here I have an example of a Docker file that I've used in some of my previous videos. And this Docker file is for building a .NET API. And I'm not going to go into all the details about what's in this Docker file. That could actually probably be a whole video all by itself on how to, how to build Docker images. But this is a working Docker file, so let's go ahead and build it. I'm back in my terminal, and what you want to do is you want to navigate to the folder where that Docker file is. And then the docker build command is actually pretty easy. It is docker build, and you give it -t to give it a tag name. I'm going to use the name command demo, and then period. And period just means run the Docker file in the current directory. So I'll go ahead and run that, and that's going to execute all of the steps that we laid out inside that Docker file. And we can make sure that it worked by running a command from earlier, docker images. And now you can see I have an image called command demo, which is is the tag name that I gave it up here. It says it was created 4 hours ago. That's because I ran this this morning, just making sure that it was working correctly. And I haven't changed it, and so it's actually just the exact same image file. And now that we have this image built on our computer, we can use this image the same way that we can any other image. So we could go and run it, just like we did our Postgres, and I could run this API from Docker on my computer. Let's say now that you want to share this image with somebody else. Well, you can share your images by pushing it to a repository, and the command to do that is docker push. In the first section, we used docker pull to pull the Postgres image. Well, we pulled that from the Docker Hub repository. Docker push is the opposite of docker pull. So docker pull is pulling it down from the repository, and docker push is pushing it up to that repository. You can push your images to any repository that you want. In this demo here, I'm going to use Docker Hub. I've done some other videos in the past if you want to watch those where I push to a repository in Google Cloud. But Docker Hub is a public repository, and so as long as you have an account, you've signed up, and you've logged into it, you can create a repository and push an image to it. So I'll just really quickly show this. I'm in hub.docker.com. I'm signed into my account, and I'm going to create a repository. This will be called command demo. And after I've created that repository, it says right here, to push a new tag to this repository, run this command. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back into my terminal, and I'm going to paste that in there. And you can see it says, an image does not exist with that tag name. And so that leads us to our next command, which is docker tag. To use that command, you say docker tag, and then the first argument is the image name that you already have, so command demo. The second command is what you want to tag it as. So I'm going to say script bytes / command demo, and I'll run that. And then I'm going to say docker images again. And now you can see I have another image here called script bytes / command demo, and it actually has the exact same image name as command demo. And that's because it is the exact same image. We've just given it a different name. And so now if I rerun docker push, that is going to push this image up to Docker Hub into my own repository. So now if I go back into Docker Hub and I refresh the page, you can see here that this repository now contains one tag, and it was just pushed a few seconds ago. And now that this image is pushed to Docker Hub, anyone can use this image. I'm going to delete this before I publish the video, but this is how you could share your images with other people, or how you can create your own images that you want to use in your workflows. All right, so that's the whole list of commands that I think are probably the most important and the most useful commands. So let's move on to the next section, which is talking about Docker Desktop. In the previous sections, all the commands that we ran were from the terminal. But Docker Desktop has what I think is a better way of viewing some of those commands, such as images, volumes, and containers. So here's the Docker Desktop app, and I'm going to start with images. So this page just lists all the images that you have on your computer. And this is the exact same as running the Docker images command from the terminal. And so just to prove that, I'm going to open up this little terminal over here, and I ran docker images. You can see here's the two that are tagged as command demo, and then the two Postgres images. And what's really cool about Docker Desktop is you can come in here and you can delete these images, which is the same as running docker RMI for remove image. If you click on this little actions button right here, you can also see you can push it to the hub, which is the same command we ran earlier as docker push. You can also run these commands, which is docker run. So if I click that run button, you can see that it gives you all of the optional parameters you can pass into that run command. So you can give it a container name, you can map the ports, you can give it a volume, you can pass in environment variables, just like we did from the terminal. Now let's jump over to containers. So this shows you the list of containers you have on your computer, which is the same as docker ps-a. And for each one of these containers, we also have actions. So you can see my Postgres demo is still running. So if we want to, we can click stop, which is the same as running docker stop. We can start it, which is the same as running docker start. We can delete it, which is the same as running docker rm. And if you click on this row right here, it takes you into Docker logs. This logs tab here is exactly like docker logs-f that we ran earlier. If you jump over to the terminal tab, this is just like the docker exec command we ran where we passed in bash. So from here I can say ls, it's the same as we ran before. And if you go over to files, this is just like when we ran docker exec and we passed in the ls command to list all the files and folders. And lastly, if you jump over to volumes, these are all the volumes that we have. And from here you can run create, which is the same as docker volume create. This app I think is very, very helpful. I actually use Docker Desktop most of the times. I only use the terminal to run a few of those commands. And so I would just say use whichever one you're more comfortable with. If you're really comfortable using the terminal, then use all the terminal commands. And if you prefer to use nice user interfaces, then use the app. And that's it for this lesson. I hope you guys found this useful. And like I said in the very beginning, these aren't all of the Docker commands. There's a whole bunch more that you can run. I'll put a link down below to the docs page for Docker that lists all the different commands that there are. And even the ones that I showed you, there are a lot more options on what can be used on those commands. If you think I missed some of the more basic commands, let me know down below. If you did find this video helpful, please consider liking and subscribing. And thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.